On this Thursday night, a boost to the vaccine rollout. Millions of Canadians will get their second dose sooner than expected, while confusion lingers about the AstraZeneca shot.
It's use it or lose it.
And more provinces prepare to reopen. Busted, the federal NDP leader caught on camera violating pandemic protocols. Getting cash to go green, the new federal grant to help make your home more energy efficient. And justice, decades later.
33 months of his life wiped off the slate.
The apology to Italian Canadians interned during the Second World War.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with some news about the interval between doses of COVID-19 vaccine. Up to 50 million doses are expected by the end of July in Canada, and more provinces say enough is en route now to reduce the wait for that crucial second dose. In British Columbia, the wait for a second shot is now about 8 weeks for Pfizer and Moderna instead of 16 weeks.
Now that we have a steady supply coming to BC, the number of people who now have their first dose is high enough that we're able to speed up delivery of second doses for the age-based and CEV immunizations.
How long you'll have to wait for your second shot does depend on where you live. Each province is setting its own timelines, and there are different second dose strategies for the mRNA vaccines and the AstraZeneca vaccine. Getting both doses faster will be a game changer, both in how we interact with each other and where we can travel. In tonight's top story, Abigail Bimman brings us up to speed on the changing timelines.
With an uptick in vaccine supply, more than half of the country's provinces have announced some kind of move to reduce dose intervals.
Our delivery plan for second doses has been sped up by about 2 to 4 weeks.
Everybody being vaccinated prior to August 31st.
We are planning for all eligible Manitobans to receive their second dose should they want one by end of July.
During a vaccine drought, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization stretched out the gap to 16 weeks to protect as many people as possible with a first dose.
The initial strategy, I think, was ideal for the situation we were in. It's time to change.
Dr. Fahad Razak has seen a dramatic decrease in patients in the Toronto COVID ward he's been running.
The patients who I admitted with COVID, they fall really into two groups. The first is people who haven't received that first dose, but the second are people who have received it, but probably didn't mount enough of an immune response and would have benefited from a second dose.
He and many others are pushing to get second doses into more at-risk Canadians faster. And while there is recent data out of the UK suggesting the antibody response is greater in older people who waited 12 weeks between Pfizer doses.
But we actually don't know if that makes any difference, practically speaking, in terms of the immune protection that you have.
There's also the separate issue of AstraZeneca, with questions around whether Canadians will be able to choose an mRNA vaccine for their booster. Thursday, Quebec announced people can get a second AstraZeneca shot after just 8 weeks.
I'm very worried that we're basically going to end up throwing vaccine away.
While in Ontario, confusion prevails. It took family doctor Michelle Cohen 2 weeks of phone calls and upset tweets before Public Health picked up her leftover 230 doses, expiring May 31st.
We don't know what's going on. We keep asking. We're offering to drive at places. We've got no information. So I was pretty angry.
Global News asked federal public health officials if they expect provinces to eventually get down to the manufacturer recommended interval. That's 3 or 4 weeks for Pfizer and Moderna. Dr. Howard New said he didn't think provinces would drop below an 8 or 10 week gap, but he pinned his answer to science rather than supply, saying that could change based on new data. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
There is some new clarity tonight on when Canada will get its next shipment of Moderna. The federal government says it's expecting 500,000 doses next week and 1.5 million doses mid-June. Moderna was expected to send more than 14 million doses by the end of June. So far, only about 5.6 million have actually been delivered. More than 22 million vaccine doses have been given out so far in Canada. 53% of people have now had at least one dose. 4.6% have been fully vaccinated. Western University in Ontario is mandating that students living in residence must be vaccinated before they can return to in-person classes this fall. Students at Western's affiliated university colleges will also be required to have at least one dose assuming there's enough vaccine supply. Those who can't get the shot before arriving will have 14 days after they move in to get vaccinated. There are some exceptions, including those who can't get the shot for medical reasons. An on-campus vaccination clinic will be set up this summer at Western for students, staff, and faculty. Manitoba still has the highest rate of active infections per capita in North America, and it is extending its COVID-19 restrictions.
We're not in a position to reopen, and we are not in a position to send our students who are currently in remote learning situations back into the classroom either.
Hundreds of schools across Manitoba will remain closed until at least June 7th, and a ban on gatherings and businesses will be extended for another 2 weeks. Prince Edward Island has the lowest rate of infection in the country, and no one there has died from COVID-19. Those accomplishments were acknowledged today as the province announced its reopening plan. The 5-step plan culminates in September after 80% of residents over the age of 12 are expected to be fully vaccinated. There will be limited public health measures at that point. In August, the province will allow visitors from outside Atlantic Canada with no self-isolation requirements for fully vaccinated travelers. And New Brunswick's health minister says that province could drop all restrictions as early as August 2nd, but only if at least 75% of people are fully vaccinated. The first of the province's 3-step plan could begin as early as June 7th, with the gradual lifting of restrictions, provided vaccinations stay on track and there is not a sharp rise in hospitalizations. It means no self-isolation or testing for travelers within Atlantic Canada, except for Nova Scotia. That province would rejoin the Atlantic bubble July 1st. Well, the Calgary Stampede is hoping to attract visitors from across the country this July. It will be the first major event in Canada since the pandemic began. But can organizers pull it off without putting the public at risk? Heather Yourex-West reports.
On the grounds of Stampede Park, preparations are well underway. The Nashville North tent is under construction, getting set to host live music, something that now seems so foreign after so many months of COVID-19 restrictions.
The Stampede will be the first major event in Canada to move forward since the beginning of the COVID crisis. And that's a responsibility that we do not take in any way lightly.
The Stampede says there will be COVID safety protocols in place. Masks may be required. There won't be any dancing in the Nashville North tent. And some events like the Chuck Wagon races won't happen at all.
The Midway, food, fun, animals, all of those experiences will be here. They'll look a little different.
I'm somewhat anxious about it myself. It's an immensely complicated situation because you'd be thinking about who goes to Stampede, how likely are they to have been immunized, how can the risk be managed when you're trying to bring together such a large group of people?
People that will be coming from other communities too. Next door in BC, there are still travel restrictions in place. Those from Alberta and elsewhere are still asked to stay away. Dr. Brian Conway says those restrictions could be safely eased as COVID cases fall and more people receive their first and even second vaccine dose.
If we do all of that right, numbers will go down, there'll be no new hotspots, and I would feel comfortable about allowing interprovincial travel.
But it's a cautious comfort, he says, that depends on things like new variants staying away and the vaccine rollout staying strong. Summer may be a few weeks away, but as we've seen so often in this pandemic, in just a few weeks, a lot can change. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
The Toronto startup company Switch Health has managed hundreds of thousands of COVID tests for international travelers arriving in Canada. Company representatives will appear before the House of Commons Health Committee tomorrow to answer questions about managing their government contract for border testing. And insiders who have spoken to Global News say there are concerns the company must address. Roberta Bell reports.
While you were waiting to talk to a nurse,
Global News spoke to 5 workers about their experiences supervising COVID test swabbing for Switch Health and as protecting their identities for fear of workplace reprisal. All 5 say they were hired for the job by subcontractor Blast Marketing.
It says begin test with nurse. That's what they click on before I connect via video. So, and then to be told that I am not a nurse.
Twice, that employee claims they've had to tell patients they're being misled.
I felt like an imposter being in that space.
the federal government awarded a nearly $100 million contract to Toronto startup company Switch Health to manage this system. Switch Health has repeatedly declined interviews with Global News, but maintains most of the telehealth team supervising the testing is comprised of nurses. At most, only 2.9% is not.
Insert the swab.
And while experts say this type of anterior nasal testing doesn't necessarily require the supervision of a medical professional, Ontario says only qualified nurses may use the title of nurse. Violators could be fined up to $50,000 under the province's Nursing Act. After Global News began investigating, on May 12th, Blast Marketing directed some employees in a group chat to immediately start referring to themselves as telehealth generalists and not telehealth nurse assistants. Switch Health says it has since updated its language and informed all employees. In a written statement, it says generalists work alongside its nursing team and have oversight by a registered nurse or registered practical nurse, and that its leadership has never instructed an individual who is not licensed or registered as a nurse to identify themselves as a nurse and is not aware of any record of this occurring.
Behind the scenes, it's pure madness.
Global News has also agreed to protect the identity of this former Blast Marketing employee. She says she spent 2 months offering customer support to travelers. Switch Health says employees receive proper training and that it has designated teams to provide it. But this employee says they just got a day.
We just write into a group chat full of equally lost people, and it's all of us asking the same questions, like, this is my client, what do we do here?
Blast Marketing says it has no knowledge or indication that any of its team members are fraudulently presenting themselves that way. The Public Health Agency of Canada says it's now aware of such concerns and is actively following up. Roberta Bell, Global News, Regina.
Well, we've all been longing to hug friends and loved ones again. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has gone ahead and done it. These pictures have emerged of Singh not wearing a mask and hugging someone who is not part of his household. We are all tired of the restrictions, and political leaders who have spent the last year telling us to obey them aren't exempt from following them. Mike LeCouture reports.
I encourage everyone to continue to follow all the public health guidelines.
That was Jagmeet Singh on Wednesday, reinforcing public health advice to Canadians as we continue to battle this third wave of COVID-19. However, video obtained by Global News shows he didn't follow that same advice back on May the 8th. In it, Singh is seen getting out of a car with a provincial NDP staffer. Neither of them is wearing a mask on their face, and they hug.
Yeah, I still had the mask around my neck, and which is one of those things I just forgot that I was not yet actually safe to take it down.
Singh and the staffer had just returned from a drive-through iftar event where both men were seen wearing masks and following public health guidelines. Singh even posed for pictures with people at the event while keeping a safe distance. Still, he admits it was a lapse in judgment that shouldn't have happened.
This happens to a lot of people. At the end of the day, you kind of let down your guard, and I'm sorry for that. And I really hope that this doesn't discourage anyone from wearing their masks and following public health protocols.
Like many politicians who are used to handshakes and hugs, Singh says until that day, he'd been very careful navigating meet and greets and admits he made a mistake.
And so I reverted back to the pre-pandemic days where I would greet my friends with a hug or say bye with a hug.
Something we all hope we can get back to doing once health rules allow. Mike LeCouture, Global News, Ottawa.
Help to upgrade your house. Coming up, Ottawa's new grant to make homes greener. You could be eligible for a new federal program to help make your home more energy efficient. The Greener Homes Grant will help pay up to $5,000 for things like solar panels and replacing old furnaces. Our chief political correspondent David Akin explains the theory behind it and how to apply.
Well, Donna, back in 2007, the Harper government had a very similar home energy retrofit program, and it was wildly popular. More than 500,000 Canadians took federal cash for home renovations before that program was shut down in 2012.
But now, the Trudeau government is resurrecting that program, turning what the Harper government called the Eco Energy Retrofit Program into the Canada Greener Homes Grant program, a cash handout of up to $5,000 to homeowners for qualifying projects.
As a homeowner, you don't want to have to pay extra money on energy bills because of a leaky window when you could save that money for school supplies or groceries. And as a country, every effort counts to keep our air clean and our environment healthy.
Eligible projects could include replacing oil furnaces or low-efficiency systems, improving or replacing insulation, installing high-efficiency water heaters or solar panels, fixing drafty windows or doors.
This is a good program to fight climate change, save homeowners money, and create jobs, but there are many other things we're doing as well.
Minutes after Trudeau's announcement, an online portal opened up where homeowners can apply to get into the program.
It's going to make our business go through the roof. There's no doubt about it. In fact, as I was just mentioning to you, my phone's been ringing off the hook for the last 2 hours with people hearing about the news.
The grants are also retroactive for work done as far back as December 1st, 2020. But there's no hurry. The program is set to run for the next 5 years.
And it might be a while before Canadians can take full advantage of this program. For one thing, with the home building boom in many cities around the country, it can be tough to find a contractor. And second, with the price of lumber and other building materials near an all-time high, well, doing a home rental right now might be kind of pricey even with the federal cash. Donna?
All right, David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. Still ahead, China fights back on theories about the origins of COVID-19. China is accusing the Biden administration of politicizing the investigation into the origins of the novel coronavirus. President Biden has ordered a review of the intelligence about where the virus emerged. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson says this shows that they don't care about the facts or the truth and have zero interest in a serious science-based study of origins. Their one aim is to use the pandemic to pursue stigmatization and political manipulation to shift the blame. The theory that the virus may have accidentally leaked from a lab in Wuhan in late 2019 is gaining traction. China has repeatedly denied any link. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he supports the call by the U.S. and other countries to better understand the origins of COVID-19 to ensure accountability and better protect the world from future pandemics. Next, an apology decades after the internment of Italian Canadians.
Nous devons, c'est la vérité.
What we owe each other is the truth. That was the message from French President Emmanuel Macron in Rwanda today. He asked for forgiveness and admitted France bears terrible responsibility for the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Macron said while France was not an accomplice in the genocide, terrible errors in judgment were made and warnings ignored. He said France had for too long valued silence over examination of the truth. Ethnic Hutus killed more than 800,000 people, most of them members of the Tutsi minority, in carnage that lasted about 100 days. France and other Western powers failed to intervene.
To the men and women who were taken to prisoner of war camps or jail without charge, people who are no longer with us to hear this apology. To the tens of thousands of innocent Italian Canadians who were labeled enemy aliens, we are sorry. Chiediamo scusa.
Prime Minister Trudeau formally apologized today to Italian Canadians who were sent to internment camps during the Second World War. It was feared they were supporters of the fascist Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, who had allied himself with Adolf Hitler. Though, as Mike Armstrong explains, some of those interned had sons fighting in the Canadian military.
There is very little left today, but this site in Kananaskis, Alberta was once Internment Camp 130. It's one of the places where during the Second World War, Italian Canadians were locked up. None of those men are still alive today, but their experiences are still felt by the generations that followed. Salvatore Vistarchi was picked up in June of 1940 in Montreal.
33 months of his life wiped off the slate.
Your father could have been bitter.
Yeah, oh yeah.
He wasn't.
He could have been. No, he wasn't. He wasn't. He just wondered why.
Sono passati 9 anni!
When Italy allied itself with Nazi Germany in 1940, Canada declared about 31,000 Italian Canadians as enemy aliens. About 600 men and 4 women were interned without a trial. Salvatore Vistarchi spent most of his time in this camp in Petawawa, Ontario, after being picked up on the day he asked his girlfriend to marry him.
That's a real hurt. To go home after a nice dinner, after finally finding the girl or finding the man that you want, you go to bed, you're happy, and there's a knock on your door, and the next thing you're in handcuffs. Not too nice.
Now, for some, there was insult added to injury. There were men who were interned by Canada while their sons fought for Canada in Europe. There was even a man whose son had to leave school to support the family and was then conscripted into the Canadian Army.
My father built both sides of the street.
Vistarchi's father rebuilt his life and went into business as a home builder. He basically built the whole neighborhood. His daughter says he would always tell her someday there would be justice. She says this was that day.
It's a happy day.
How unfortunate is it that this apology comes when your father's not here to hear it?
Yeah. That's what I really regret. At least if one of them had been alive, that would have been amazing. But you know what? They know. They know.
Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with news about a book that was in heavy rotation in my house and the homes of millions of people. The man who created The Very Hungry Caterpillar has died. Eric Carle was an author and illustrator who created many other beloved classics. He was 91 years old. His team posted on Twitter, "Thank you for sharing your talent with generations of young readers." Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.